So my role with WorkSafe, I don't think you need to know too much about me, but I've been with WorkSafe for about a year now, and the team I work on are the team that supply the guidance. So the strategies sort of come from Wellington. I'm in the construction team, and my portfolio, or my area of expertise, is working at heights, and so coming to Christchurch and supporting our inspectors. Now, just as I dive into that, there are some inspectors here this evening, and we've also, for this event, because it's about consistency around the country, we've invited a series of honoured inspectors throughout the country here this evening. So if it's not too much, can I ask the inspectors to stand up, those from Canterbury and those from other parts of the country? And the reason I'm asking you to do that is so you know to whisper if they're sitting next to you. But also at the end of this, if you wanted a one-on-one call or you just wanted clarification and you don't want to use a microphone later on to do that, these are the teams that'll be mingling around a little bit afterwards. So thanks for that, these inspectors. Good as gold. So just a little bit of brief on why we are here and how we came to be. The Falls from Heights campaign is now in its 4th year. You're aware that there's a Falls from Heights campaign that's been running? Excellent. And some perceive this as a focus in the residential sector and a good way to shake up builders, and I assure you it's not. With the creation of WorkSafe and leading into that, the strategies around what is causing serious harm, what is causing serious deaths actually, and what can we do about it? And it stood out quite literally that people falling off stuff in construction, especially under the 3 metres, and I'm sure you're all very aware of the history, but that history and that message has been current, very current for the past couple of years, and scaffolding and edge protection seems to be one of the preferred controls for these safe working at heights. No longer is it acceptable to say I'm wearing a harness and a harness system that is inappropriate. The emphasis is not on getting scaffolding. No one's telling you to get scaffolding. That's not the point at all. The emphasis is on, can you eliminate this harm? Can you isolate the risk and the hazard? And if not, can you minimise? Hang on. Go back to that isolate again. And the preferred method of isolate, guardrails and scaffolding seems to speak for itself, and we're talking countrywide. This is a catalyst. There's some really good examples of good practice going on in the city. There is so much going on in the city, but I assure you this is reflected nationally, which is another reason as to why we brought our inspectors here. So let's go back to that isolate as to how you're controlling these hazards. I'm going to speak briefly on the responsibilities of the scaffolding supplier and then the responsibilities of those scaffold workers. And it's not just scaffolding, sorry for using that word, this is edge protection, guard railing. So we fit under that same umbrella. And hopefully at the end of this evening too, you'll get clarity on some of these grey areas in between what is scaffolding, what is guard railing, what is 25 degrees, what can I do, can I still wear a harness in some instances. Scaffolding and working at height is slightly unique in the sense that it's a trade or an industry that's regulated. So it's mentioned in the Act. Now that doesn't mean that if you're a scaffolding company or working at heights, you've got more responsibility under the Act. It's just those responsibilities are emphasised. And you may want to know, and I should have checked this with Evgeny first because this might be an inside trade secret, but when our inspectors are talking to you about is that scaffold in good nick, generally they shouldn't be saying you need more planks on that, the handrail's the wrong height, or the distance off the wall's too far, because it should be linked back to the sections or the regulations of the Health and Safety Employment Act. And this is quite literally one of them we use quite commonly, and it's a basic statement. Can you get that? I know it's a cut and paste, but pretty much if you're supplying plant or material to someone on a construction site, you need to make sure that that's in good nick, that it's right for the job, and the person using it understands it. And that's black and white legislation, and whether you know the legislation or not, you might be familiar with terms from the best practice guidelines. So taking the best practice guidelines, now interpretation of that actual section of the Act. So just to reiterate, you're not going to be jumped on for not having sole boards under your standards when you should have sole boards under your standards, or your kick boards not in place. You're going to be challenged under the fact that you've supplied something. There's clear industry guidance on how it should be supplied, and we think you should be doing a better job of it. The best practice guidelines for scaffolding interpretates that message as you must develop a clear understanding of what's required. And that may even mean a communication to the person who's paying you, of course, because that's your the main responsibility, but also the fact that the build changes on a daily, weekly basis, and that other trades may also need to use that. I'm forever getting phone calls from the Roofing Association, the poor bricklayers and the fascia guy. He whinges about that fascia guy. So I'm getting phone calls from those guys about, hey, hang on, at the planning stage, a lot of these issues could have probably been ironed out given the fact that the responsibility to alter the scaffold fit for purpose and such. I'm not saying if you've been asked to build a scaffold for exterior cladding, we're going to force you to build a scaffold for the chimney out of masonry stone. That's not at all. You build the scaffold for the contract, but you need to take into account that other trades might be using it, and those responsibilities are there in the communication stage with the principal. Develop a clear understanding. Design the scaffold. Make sure that it is fit for purpose. So really hanging on that fit for purpose. Make sure that if it is for a block layer, that it will take the weight. Making sure that if it is for, and some of these residential sites get pretty big. You know, I've gone to some of these residential houses being built thinking, is this a motel? This is 3 lifts high. It's someone's house, you know, which is grand, it's great. But there shouldn't be any differences between commercial and residential scaffolding when it comes to making sure it's fit for purpose. And that could be, the scaffold needs to be wider. Are the heights right? So on and so forth. So planning for the scaffolding and, of course, for the scaffolding process. We're going to be putting a little bit more emphasis, if we are not now, on the safe methods of work. But I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. Providing a scaffold that meets the manufacturer's specifications and the best practice guidelines. And so that's about the industry's expectations. You're familiar with the best practice guidelines in scaffolding, the best practice guidelines for roofing and such? Good as gold. They're industry created documents. And I think they're important that you're aware of them because they are industry created documents. We do endorse the practices, but they're not written by WorkSafe, and they shouldn't be. They're written by the industry, and it's industry's expectations on what safe looks like. So it's quite important that you're quite familiar with that or working towards that. And the other good thing about it is it's what our inspectors carry. If you want to know what our inspectors are thinking, refer to the best practice guidelines because we should be referring to what industry's expectations are. So we also use those best practice guidelines to measure and gauge what's going on. Inspect it and make sure it's good in good condition. Now, I know there's some grey areas in and around this 5 metres and who should tag and who can. I'm happy to clarify those or put our point across, but regardless of height, residential, 5 metres or over, scaffolding needs to be in good nick and maintained in good nick, and it's your responsibility, unless, of course, you've handed over that responsibility. You need to ensure that once the scaffold's been built, it's safe and compliant, and when you leave it safe and compliant, whatever means you want to do that, and ensure that there's a process there. Now, this scaffold could be there for 1 month, it could be there for 1 week, and it could be used by different trades, so whatever process you're going through, regardless of height. So when a user uses it, they know it's safe. When an alteration happens, they know it's safe. And just as importantly, but least importantly, an inspector comes across it, they know it's been put in a safe condition. No worries with that. These are from the best practice guidelines, and just reiterating that under the Act, scaffolding and working at height is mentioned, and this is the interpretation through the industry best practice guidelines. Cool. So scaffolders must. Now, what I've taken here is Regulation 53 out of the Health and Safety Employment Act. So this is black and white. This is specific to getting a certificate of competence. Now, if you're going to get a certificate of competence, these are the sort of traits you should demonstrate. But at the same time, these are the sorts of measures we apply to anyone building a scaffold. Okay? Scaffolders must have a thorough knowledge of scaffolding. That sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. We're happy to guide. Absolutely happy to guide. Some of our inspectors aren't experts, and they don't need to be experts. They don't need to be experts. They know the general principles. They know the dog's balls of what looks safe. They're happy to share what we're thinking. But at the end of the day, the expectation is on you to have that knowledge of the scaffolding. The scaffolding company must have, the scaffolder, the team leader, the person taking responsible for that build, must have a clear understanding of the erection process. the maintenance process, and of course the dismantling of a scaffold, and the practices, so safe work methods. And it's an interesting position I have now, because I'm privy to all sorts of groups and stuff, and as a scaffolder it was like everyone else's fault, you know, I'm a scaffolder, mate, that's how it is. But it seems to be now that we get this Force from Heights campaign, there's greater awareness of the concerns and the harms, the social factors involved in an accident, the greater efficiencies and productivities of having a good scaffold or working from behind a rail. You know, the Roofing Association is just wagging their tail about this whole campaign because it now means that roofers are working more efficiently. I don't know if they work happier, but they are a happy bunch. But instead of having harnesses that weren't really tied to anything, and doing courses that really didn't help them in the job they're doing, they've now got rails around them and even better ladders and platforms and stuff. So there's been some really good energy behind this campaign and this focus. So it's a bit disappointing when, and no, present company excluded, of course, I know he's here. When builders ring up and say, you know what, I took your advice and I invested a few $1,000s in getting a scaffolding company in, and it's brilliant, it's well worth it. My boys love it. In fact, for the next build, we're going to factor it in. But I'm a bit concerned that the things we can't do, like walk the top plate or walk the trusses or climb purlins, these scaffolders are doing that. What's that about? Now, our main emphasis, our main ebb is quite literally, let's get some scaffolding and edge protection or better systems in place. And we've still got a lot of work to do in that place. Should we really be coming back and talking to the industry that whose responsibility it is to make that happen, and say, look, how are you guys working? What are you guys doing about it? You know, it's not a good look and it's not a good fit, but the expectation are scaffolders should be able to, from very low to very high, keep themselves and keep their team safe and demonstrate good practice and work as tradesmen or tradeswomen. Have had suitable recent. Now this is a requirement to get a certificate of competence, and you must have one if you're building a scaffold over 5 metres. Have had recent training and experience and knowledge, but at the same time, if under 5 metres and you don't have to be a certified scaffolder, we should be asking those same questions. Do you know what you're doing? Who is this for? Who's going to take charge of it when you're not here? What do you mean you're going to take these off, and who's taking those planks off? So these are the same questions we'd ask regardless. So there is no height with us, and it's not a height thing at all. It's not how far you fall, it's how you fall and what you land on. And it seems to be that the residential sector, and especially in Christchurch, has benefited from the efficiencies of these scaffolding and these guardrails. Oh no, I'm supposed to delete that one. Yep.